Hi, I'm Catherine with Research Rockstar, and we're going to talk a little bit about data today. And the specific topic I'd like to focus on is a new type of job title or corporate function that we're seeing related to the data function in most organizations. So let's have a conversation about this. So the job title that's emerging that's really interesting to talk about is the title of Chief Data Officer. And the Chief Data Officer, well, it's kind of intuitive. The idea is that now organizations need a central role that's responsible for multiple parts of the organization that get involved in collecting and analyzing various types of data. So data is becoming a resource that comes in many forms these days, and there are many sources of data within an organization. So any organization is going to have multiple data sources available to them these days. Now, up until recently, these different data sources tended to get owned also by different functional areas. So the data sources that might be used by the market research department or a shopper insights function might be different than some of the data sources that would be used by people doing customer analytics or web traffic or e-commerce analytics and so forth. But of course, organizations also have other data sources available to them these days. For example, there's a increasing variety of really cool secondary data sources that are available. And of course, we have great access to census data, whether you're tracking consumer or business trends. There's a great deal of wonderful data available through the census. So now that organizations have so many different data sources available to them, it makes sense that there's a need for some leadership that's going to have a agnostic point of view about different data sources. That is, somebody who's going to take a look at what the organization's needs are, what business decisions it needs to make, and in a very agnostic way, decide which type of data source is going to be best, which type of data methodology and analysis is going to be best to meet that specific need. One of the challenges is that sometimes people who come from specific functional areas within an organization, they get sort of accustomed to certain types of data sources. And so the thing that's really exciting about the idea of a chief data officer is that there's this recognition that there are a lot of wonderful data sources out there. They all have their pros and cons, and we need to have a really objective way of deciding when to harness the power of different ones. Now, I personally don't know a lot of organizations that have a chief data officer. This is a prediction that's been made both widely by Gartner Group and IDC. And those are analyst firms that have a lot of, well, they both have a great track record with tracking these sorts of trends. So I will say that my personal experience anecdotally does support this trend. And the experience that I have is from looking at different organizations where I work, where I have clients and friends who, and frankly, a lot of my clients and friends work in a market research department or a consumer insights department or a shopper insights department, those types of functional areas. And what is interesting is that in some of these organizations, there have been structural changes. So the organizational structure has been getting modified the last few years, in some cases, to better coordinate and intersect all the different data functions so that the customer analytics people or the e-commerce analytics people and the market research or shopper insights people are all reporting into a common structure. Now, there are a lot of variations in what that looks like and who reports to who and where the actual both vertical and horizontal integration takes place with that kind of organizational structure. But there is definitely a consolidation. There's definitely an overlap. So anecdotally, I'm seeing this in organizations that I get to work with. And the fact that IDC and Gartner are now predicting this chief data officer role, I think that really, those what I've experienced anecdotally, I think jives really well and aligns really well with what IDC and Gartner are predicting. But even more interesting than the fact that this is happening, I think, is what it really means for people who are in the market research and consumer insight space in a broader way, which is who's going to be that chief data officer? What's their background going to be? What are their credentials going to be? And from what functional areas that exist today is that person most likely to come from if an organization is going to groom that person internally? Are they more likely to hire somebody who's currently running market research or consumer insights? Are they more likely to groom somebody who's coming from the customer data analytics kind of world at the organization? Maybe the person who's really the e-commerce data expert, if e-commerce is a big part of that business, that could be a path. What's important is that there is no single path. This is all very new. So it's too soon to say what types of professionals from what different functional areas of an organization will have the best path here. I do think that obviously those functional areas that can speak data have an advantage, so that this is great news for people who are in market research and consumer insights and shopper insights and customer analytics, all these different functional areas, right? All these different areas of expertise are about data. The question is, which of these functional areas can evolve into that data agnostic role where they're not over relying or biased towards one or two data sources? So again, we've got so many data sources these days. That chief data officer needs to be somebody who's going to know when to do a survey or focus group and collect self-reported data. That person's going to need to know when to use observational data, whether through ethnographic research or social media research. They're going to have to know how to, when it's appropriate or not appropriate to use in-house databases from customer databases and e-commerce databases, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that there's any slam dunk winner here in terms of the path of least resistance to achieving a chief data officer career. I do think it's something that we have to plan for, but I think that there are a lot of different types of qualified professionals who can evolve into that data agnostic role. I don't think there's any one existing profession that has a slam dunk advantage to that path. So it's really interesting, and for those of us in the profession, I hope this is a good conversation starter to think about, do you want your career path to be becoming on the path to a chief data officer position, and what would that mean for you, in terms of how you're going to develop your career? So I hope that was a useful conversation. I enjoyed having it, and I look forward to any comments or questions. If you want to continue the conversation, here's how to reach me. Thanks.